Should we start? مرحبا والسلام عليكم. شكرا على استقبالكم، وشكرا أكثر شيء للبحرين Human Rights Society عشان دبروا هالاجتماع آخر دقيقة. وخليني أبلش في إنجليزي لأنه مثل ما عم بتشوفوا عربيتي ضعيفة كتير، فأبلش أحسن من أبهدل حالي. Thank you all for coming here today on such short notice. Thanks especially to the Bahrain Human Rights Society for allowing us to use their facilities to organize this press conference. I want to introduce myself and my organization and my colleague before we discuss why we're here today holding this press conference. So, my name is Sarah Lee Whitson. I'm the Executive Director of the Middle East and North Africa Division at Human Rights Watch. This is my colleague Mariwan Hamasaid, who is our researcher for Bahrain. We are both based in New York. But for those of you who don't know about Human Rights Watch, Human Rights Watch is an international, independent, non-governmental organization that works to document and expose human rights abuses in over 90 countries around the world. When I say that we're independent, what I mean is that we're not affiliated with any government or governmental agency, nor any international governmental agency such as the United Nations. And when I say that we're non-profit, I mean that we do not accept funding from any government or governmental agency. All of our support comes from private, individual donations, contributions, charitable contributions, including, fortunately, charitable contributions from people here in the Middle East and North Africa. The Middle East and North Africa Division documents abuses in 17 countries in the Middle East and North Africa, and we currently have 5 offices in the region, in Beirut, Cairo, Jerusalem, Tunis, I'm very proud to say, very major new development. We never thought we would have an office in Tunis, and if you asked me 2 years ago if we would have an office in Tunis, I would ask you what drugs you were taking. But here we are in 2013, and we have an office in Tunis, and one day I hope we will have an office in Bahrain. I welcome that. As an international human rights organization, I think it's important to clarify what we do and what we focus on. Our work is exclusively limited to human rights law and international humanitarian law, or the laws of war. Human rights law is the law that governs what governments do with respect to protecting and upholding the human rights of people who live in their country or outside their country. But it is important to note that human rights law is a law that applies only to governments. It does not apply to individual citizens, but it applies to people who are part of a government. International humanitarian law, another big area of our focus, regulates the conduct of governments and armed groups. So that is a case where we look at the conduct of non-governmental actors, specifically armed groups. I guess I know that there was quite a bit of discomfort about the fact that we were having a press conference here in Bahrain. Really, I am so glad and happy that we're having this press conference here in Bahrain because, in fact, this is something we have been doing in Bahrain for many, many years. And so after a while of not being able to have press conferences in Bahrain, I am delighted that the Bahraini government has shown a willingness to tolerate our press conference here. And I hope we will all recognize that as a reflection of the transparency and openness and interest in dialogue that the Bahraini government is reflecting in allowing us to have our press conference here. And I do want to note, and I think it's important to note, that not every country in our region allows Human Rights Watch to come to their country, allows Human Rights Watch to have a press conference in their country. Just across the border here, very close to Bahrain, Human Rights Watch has not been to Iran, for example, for over 10 years. And of course, we have never had a press conference in Iran because the government of Iran is not willing to show this level of transparency and openness. And I think it is important to keep in mind that in its willingness to allow Human Rights Watch to be here today, in its willingness to allow us to gather here today to hold this press conference, this is something that is laudable and for which we are grateful. We are here, we were here as part of a 3-person delegation. We're now down to 2 because one of our colleagues had to return. And we were granted a 5-day visa by the government, facilitated by the Ministry of Human Rights, the newly established Ministry of Human Rights. And, you know, again, I want to emphasize how happy and grateful I am that the Bahraini government has invited us, allowed us, accepted our request to come back to Bahrain to conduct our work. However, I must say that I'm still deeply saddened that we are not where we used to be 2 years ago, when Human Rights Watch would enter Bahrain freely without needing to ask in advance for visas, without needing to ask for approval of our staff members, and without having our staff members rejected from admission. In fact, as many of you know, the colleague that I think all of you, many of you rather, know better than anyone else at Human Rights Watch, Joe Stork, has been banned from the country. You know, we think it's deeply dismaying that the government should make distinctions among our colleagues, because if one thing I'd like to affirm to everyone today is that all of us at Human Rights Watch have the same message and have the same outlook and have the same assessment of what we see here in Bahrain today and our findings, and that no individual is taking a position at Human Rights Watch that's different from the position of anyone else. During this 5-day visit, the Ministry of Human Rights, I think, worked very hard to facilitate meetings that we've had with government officials. And again, I must recognize the Bahraini government's willingness to sit down with Human Rights Watch and have very tough and very frank conversations and discussions. And I can assure you that not every government official would welcome Human Rights Watch, would welcome me or my colleague Mariwan to ask the tough questions that we asked of them and to endure what I'm sure in some cases felt like a bit of an interrogation. I can tell you, for example, that the Emirates government has not so accepted meetings with Human Rights Watch, and that, for example, our meetings with the Saudi government are far more rare than they are here with the Bahraini government. And I think we have to keep in mind what is positive here. And what remains very positive here is that there is a willingness to have dialogue. There is a willingness to exchange views and to hear each other's opinions. And this is so important for the future of this country. And in fact, I think what will be essential to bringing this country together is an ability to talk to each other. Now, there were some in the Bahraini government who warned us that a press conference here today could harm the national dialogue that's been proposed. And I want to reassure the government that we have no intention to do that. And if anything, we welcome the government's efforts to establish a national dialogue. We welcome the government's efforts to establish any kind of a dialogue with its citizens, and that ultimately, it's going to be their responsibility to bring the whole family of the country together again. And we obviously don't take a position on any of the political issues that are going to be discussed, we hope, at the National Dialogue. That's outside the domain and the work that we do. Just to reassure everyone here that we have really nothing but hope that the National Dialogue will give people what they want. I wanted to briefly review who it is we met with here in Bahrain, both in the government and outside the government. We met with the Minister of Interior. We met with the Director of Public Security, General Tariq Hassan. We met with the Attorney General. We met with the newly appointed head of the Special Investigations Unit. We met with representatives of the Ministry of Social Affairs and the Ministry of Human Rights and the Ministry of Labor. We met with various representatives of opposition societies, political associations here in the country. We met with human rights activists, and we met with families of those who have been detained in prison. And most significantly, we had the opportunity to meet with the detainees, the political detainees in this country, the most prominent human rights activist detained in this country, Nabil Rajab, a medic who is among the medics who've been imprisoned, and one of the teachers and the leaders of the teachers movement that have been imprisoned. And I truly am grateful and welcome the permission that the government granted us to meet with them. And it meant a great deal to me personally to be able to meet with these men whom we believe have been wrongly imprisoned. And I hope it meant something to them as well to have an opportunity to know that international organizations like Human Rights Watch have not forgotten about them and will not forget about them. I want to note particularly that at the Jau prison, the director of prisons really, I think, went out of his way to grant us the access and freedom and privacy we wanted to meet with the detainees in private, further allowing us to take photographs and videos of our conversations with the detainees, which we are sharing online. The pictures should already be up, and hopefully the videos will be up as well soon. And I think some of you can hear for yourself at least what some of the detainees had to say. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough battery time to videotape all of them, but nevertheless, I think that we're pleased that we're able to share some of the message that they had. But now I want to discuss our observations and our assessments of the human rights conditions in the country. And I will do so with the same frankness and straight talk that I share, that my organization shares with every government that we monitor around the world. And I think for those of you who follow Human Rights Watch's work, our assessment is not very different at all from the recent report that we released just a few weeks ago in our annual report, which surveyed the situation in the country over the past year, as we do every country we monitor. Is unfortunately a very disappointing assessment. The main topic of conversation now, the main message that the Bahraini government appears to have for the world is that reform is underway. And we remain extremely skeptical that any reform process can be meaningful with the current conditions in the country. And by that, I point to two significant ongoing failures that have been noted not only by Human Rights Watch, but by the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry and the subsequent comments of Sharif Bassiouni, who authored that report. by the UN High Commissioner of Human Rights, by Amnesty International, by the European Parliament, by various European parliamentarians, American parliamentarians, indeed government representatives, human rights organizations around the world. And frankly, that is that no measure of reform, no promise of reform will really be credible until there is real accountability at the highest levels for the gross abuses that took place in the government's efforts to suppress the uprisings of 2011, and no reform promises will be credible so long as political detainees, human rights activists, doctors and medics remain unjustly imprisoned, unjustly sentenced, and spend another minute in prison. Unless the government tackles these two critical issues, its reform promises will remain hollow to most of the international community. I want to speak first about our most troubling finding, the lack of accountability. The lack of accountability for those in the Ministry of Interior and those in the Ministry of Defense that were responsible for the failures of security services in the killings, beatings, torture, injuries, arrests that took place in the wake of the uprisings. We are very delighted to know that the government, that the Ministry of Interior has investigated 117 cases of allegations of police misconduct, referring several of them for prosecution. We are further pleased that a number of police officers, 5 I believe, have been prosecuted and sentenced by the Ministry of Justice, by the courts, for their role in abusing Bahraini citizens. But we have to be real. This is not enough. We are extremely troubled and disturbed that the government, that the Ministry of Interior confirmed to us today that their internal investigations had not found any wrongdoing, any failure in responsibility by any police officer above the level of battalion commander. Frankly, that's shocking and mind-boggling. For the Minister of Interior to tell us that no police commander above the level of battalion unit commander was found to be responsible for the failures that they acknowledged took place in their handling of these demonstrations gives me extremely serious pause about whether there is any change in the culture of impunity. Impunity means that those responsible for command and control, that those responsible for taking decisions or failing to take decisions, that those responsible for allowing abuses of lower-ranking officials to happen, for stopping those from happening, for having had them happen under their watch, remain in exactly the same positions that they were in before. It is very hard to take promises of police reform seriously when the same people who were responsible for the failures in policing are still sitting in their offices making decisions about how policing should continue. If the government is serious about accountability, then the minimum we need to see is that those under whose responsibility, under whose command, under whose management, under whose supervision the police failed in their duties are held to account. But to find out instead that not a single Interior Ministry official above the level of battalion commander has been demoted, suspended, transferred, or fired makes it hard to believe that there is any real change in the operations of the security services in this country. We're also deeply troubled about the failure to show any progress in the investigations that the Attorney General and the Public Prosecutor has said are underway by the Special Investigations Unit. The Public Prosecutor and the head of the Special Investigations Unit reassured us that they were continuing to look into the command and control failures of the security services in this country. But they could not, or would not, or did not give us a single piece of information about how their investigations had developed, about whom and what levels of officials they had interrogated or investigated, or how they had conducted their investigations into command and control responsibility. I just want to quote here the conclusion that Mr. Bassiouni reached in November of 2012, and that we share, that the abuses in the Ministry of Interior and the security forces could not have happened without the knowledge of higher echelons of the command structure of the security forces. We need to see accountability for the abuses that took place at the higher echelons of the security forces. We also met with the newly established Ombudsman, whom we understand has a role, an independent role, outside the Ministry of Interior to investigate complaints against police. We welcome the promised expansion of the Ombudsman's role, which we understand will include, by new royal decree, that it will authorize investigations by the Ombudsman even if no complaint has been filed. One of the most serious shortcomings in the internal investigations conducted by the Ministry of Interior is that they appear to have relied entirely on complaints filed in individual cases, as opposed to a thorough, complete overhaul and review of every individual employed at the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Defense and the role they played in the failures in policing and security. We're also pleased that the new police ombudsman will receive an expanded role under the new royal decree that will give them authority to monitor the prisons. We have urged, in part of their review of monitoring the prisons and monitoring the police, to take a very, very close look at what appears to be a serious absence of diversity in the makeup of the police forces. For any police force to be successful, for any police force to have trust, credibility, and confidence among the population it seeks to police, it must represent the complete makeup of that community. And that's why the police and security forces, from the highest levels to the lowest levels, must show the national, ethnic, religious, sectarian diversity of this country. We've heard a lot from the government about how the diversity of Bahrain is the wealth of Bahrain. We agree. We need to see some of the wealth of Bahrain employed in the police forces. And we are completely unsatisfied by what the director of the security services told us today, which is that there are Shia in the police force, but he could not tell us, and because he does not know, whether they are 5% of the security services or 95% of the security services. That is not a credible answer. There is no way for the government to ensure the diversity of the security forces, to ensure that they represent the population both inside the prison and outside the prison, without guaranteeing real diversity, percentage diversity inside the security services. Our second biggest concern right now, and the second failure in reform, is the continued detention of the leading political activists, human rights activists, medics, doctors, and others in this country whom we've identified, whom the Bassiouni Commission has identified, whom countless international human rights bodies have identified. I must share with you my great and very personal concern for the continued unjust imprisonment of Nabil Rajab. And I want you to know that one of the reasons I'm singling out Nabil is because he's not only part of the Bahraini family, he's part of the Human Rights Watch family. Nabil has served as an advisor to the Middle East and North Africa Advisory Committee for Human Rights Watch for the past several years, and his contribution to our work goes well beyond Bahrain. He is a champion of human rights throughout the entire region. So you're not the only ones here in Bahrain who are missing the contribution that Nabil has been making to the support of human rights in Bahrain. We at Human Rights Watch are missing a friend and close associate as well. And I guess are happy to report to you that his spirits are as high as ever. His warmth, his optimism is as strong as ever. And I hope you all can take the same encouragement, the same strength from Nabil that I've taken in meeting with him. And I want to tell you that the courage and steadfastness of the detainees we met with is one that we derive great personal strength from, because we know that if they can keep up their faith and their hope that justice will be served, then we too, in the relative ease and freedom of our lives, can keep up our hope and our faith that this government will do the right thing and release these men for their unjust imprisonment. At this point, we know that the trials of many of these activists have been exhausted, that the judicial remedies available to them at the Court of Cassation have been exhausted. And we turn now to the only option available to them, which is a royal pardon. As a human rights organization, it is not with great comfort that we seek a royal pardon, because obviously we like to see the courts do their job and the courts operate as the bodies for examining law. But here there is no other option, and we hope that the king will recognize that for a reform process to be meaningful in this country, for the citizens of Bahrain to believe that the government is serious about reform, it has to release the men whom the entire international community has repeatedly condemned as being unjustly imprisoned for their political views. I point here as well to the continued harassment of human rights activists, particularly our infamous tweeter, Sayed Youssef, who I think is sitting here tweeting away as we speak, bravely tweeting away. And I must point out that there is a very serious shortcoming, misunderstanding about what freedom of speech means, particularly at the public prosecutor. The public prosecutor pointed to us the new Article 168 as the reason why Sayed Youssef is being prosecuted for allegedly posting a tweet of a protester injured in Bahrain. He cites this as an example of false and misleading information that has directly incited violence. Here I must pause to reaffirm an essential point of international law, or any law, which is direct means direct. Direct does not mean indirect. Direct is an interpretation that is obvious to everyone. If someone directly calls for violence, if someone directly says, go and commit violence, they may be credibly investigated for inciting violence. But if someone posts a message of an injured protester, if someone posts a message inviting people to a demonstration, if someone posts a message saying they hate the king or they love the king, none of those acts is incitement to violence. And any interpretation of the law that claims this is an incitement to violence is a gross misinterpretation of the law. We're also concerned about the recent re-imprisonment of Zainab al-Khawaja, who we understand has today been charged with inciting hatred and insulting the king. These are not credible offenses under international law. They do not stand the scrutiny of human rights law or the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And we are extremely wary and concerned about the ongoing persecution of human rights activists, civil society activists in this country, in particular the efforts to restrain, control, dissolve, dismantle several of the previously independent organizations in this country, from the Bar Association to the Teachers Association to the Medics Association and so on. And the Nursing Association. This is no way to build an independent civil society. This is no way to restore the faith of the people that their government is interested in reform. Finally, and I know you're all looking for my finally, so I'll keep it short. We are most concerned by the stealth operation of the new draft NGO law that we understand has now been submitted by the Ministry of Social Affairs, approved by the Cabinet, and now before the Parliament for approval. It is shocking to us that this new draft NGO law is being offered here in Manama at the same time that the government and its public relations representatives are traveling around the world claiming that the government is in reform. This law is not about reform. This draft law is about regression. This draft law is much worse than the existing NGO law, which we already know has made it very, very hard for NGOs in this country to operate as real NGOs. Unfortunately, it seems to us that Minister Belushi cannot distinguish between a gongo, or a government-controlled organization, and an NGO, a non-governmental organization. It seems very, very disturbing to us that Minister Belushi, in her new draft law, has accorded herself the power to deny the registration of an NGO if she decides that she doesn't need their services. The government of Bahrain opens itself to international ridicule when it proposes such a shockingly bad NGO law, because this is not an NGO law, this is an anti-NGO law. And I urge everyone here to read closely the provisions of this law, which not only gives the minister the right to reject any NGO if she decides she doesn't need them, it gives the Ministry of Social Affairs the right to deny an NGO for no reason at all. If the ministry gives you no response when you file for registration after 60 days, you can go to appeal. But if the Appellate Review Committee doesn't respond to your appeal in 60 days, then you are denied registration with no reason at all. This is the definition of arbitrary, authoritarian rule. This is not what an independent civil society is built on. In conclusion, I want to thank again the Bahraini government for its confidence in allowing Human Rights Watch to come here to talk in Bahrain, to allow us to meet with whomever we wanted in the country, but most significantly, to talk to those imprisoned in Zhao prison. I want to reiterate that this is not something that we take for granted or we take lightly, and we truly hope and pray that we can continue our dialogue with the Bahraini government, but most importantly, with the Bahraini people in free and open press conferences such as this one. I want to stop here and invite you to ask any questions you might have, which our translator can translate if you wish to ask in Arabic, and Mariwan or I will try to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. إذا عندكم أي سؤال أقدر أجيب لكم الميكروفون.
And just introduce yourself, if you may, so we know who's talking to us.
مرحبا أخت سارة. أحمد البوسطة.
I presume nobody else needs translation, so we'll just invade the translator.
أحمد البوسطة، صحفي متفرغ. عندما التقيتم بالمسؤولين البحرينيين في جهاز الأمن وفي الداخلية وفي وزارة حقوق الإنسان في البحرين، بماذا كانوا يبررون لكم القتل المستمر في البحرين بدم بارد بماذا يبررون قمع حرية التعبير السلمي وماذا يبررون الاعتقالات المستمرة والمداهمات الليلية وماذا يبررون طلق المفرط في استخدام الغازات السامة داخل البيوت وهاي الأشياء كل هذه الانتهاكات لحقوق الإنسان شنو كانوا يبررون لكم على أساس يقنعون العالم أنهم لا يسوون الصح؟ وكيف يكون حوار يطالبون بحوار أو وجود حوار وفي ظل موجود حقوق معظم سجناء الري خلف القضبان؟ شلون بيكون حوار جدي والانتهاكات مستمرة دون توقف دون إتاحة فرصة لأي واحد أن يعبر عن رأيه؟ شكرا.
Well, we have a lot of the same questions for the government, and we ask them many of these same questions. I want to take note of something I didn't reflect in my comments that I will reflect here, and that is the government's concern of the ongoing violence of protesters. And, you know, in all of the countries that we work in, but I would comment on the Middle East, the presence of violence among the citizenry is typically all the justification a government will offer when they talk about their policing services. And I want to reiterate that we believe the government has a responsibility and a duty to stop violent protesters, to jail violent protesters, and to secure the safety of all of its citizens. We are not here to defend violence by protesters, and I think it's not in the interests of anyone, really, to see such violence take place, because the government will justify everything it does as a response to that. That being said, we are extremely concerned about the excessive use of police force, because whatever the government's duties and obligations to maintain security, it has to do so lawfully. And police are subject to very high standards on the use of force. We have been particularly troubled by reports of the excessive use of tear gas, particularly the allegations of the weaponizing of tear gas canisters that in a number of cases have been documented to have been shot at very close range at protesters. We're also concerned about credible reports of the use of tear gas in residential communities as punishment, as collective punishment, in communities where demonstrations have taken place. We have witnessed ourselves videos of security forces lobbing what appear to be dozens, if not hundreds, of tear gas canisters indiscriminately into residential areas. We talked today with the Ministry of Interior's head of General Director of Security, as well as specifically, I want to get the name right, so give me a second. No, Tariq Al-Hassan, yes, but the official responsible for investigating investigating the use of tear gas by the police, and that it was Colonel Rashid bin Najma. And Mr. Rashid Bunajma, Colonel Rashid Bunajma, stated that they had conducted an internal investigation into the excessive use of tear gas. And that this investigation was based exclusively on complaints they had received from individuals and organizations in Bahrain, videos they had submitted and so forth, but that they had been unable to document this information with the dates of the videos and so forth. And our response to this, to them and to the public, is that that's an inadequate investigation. That given the extent of the credible allegations about the excessive use of tear gas in residential areas and firing of tear gas canisters at close range, the government, the ministry, the police needed to do a much more comprehensive and independent, far-reaching investigation into the use of tear gas in the country, not one that depends or waits on people to come and file complaints. Much of the public doesn't have faith in the police and aren't going to file complaints. And so it is incumbent on the government to conduct its own comprehensive investigation. Do you have anything to add?
أحمد الحجيري من الجمعية البحرينية لحقوق الإنسان. يعني أنا أريد أن أسأل هيومن رايتس ووتش، هل تشاطرون كناشطي حقوق الإنسان بأن ما تقوم به الحكومة من خلق مؤسسات هي مجرد لتحسين صورتها أمام المنظمات والمجتمع الدولي، مثل المؤسسة الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان؟ بسيط أن تقول شكلت مؤسسة لحقوق الإنسان، ولكن تأتي بعناصر هي موالية ولا تهتم لحالة حقوق الإنسان. أن تخلق مكتب لتلقي الشكاوى والانتهاكات حقوق الإنسان، ولكن تأتي برسميين ومحسوبين على النظام. ألا تعتقدون بأن هذا هو ضحك على يعني العالم ولف ودوران حول أن استحقاقات أن يجب أن تكون بها الحكومة أن تأتي بمؤسسات صحيحة ومقبولة؟ بالإضافة، ألا تعتقدون بأن البحرين هي مثال سيء بالنسبة للتضييق على مؤسسات حقوق الإنسان، خصوصا في البحرين هناك فقط هذه الجمعية هي الوحيدة المستقلة، وعندنا المركز محل قانونيا حسب رأياتهم، وبقية
تقدر تكرر آخر جملة؟
بما أريد أقول أن هناك تضييق على مؤسسات حقوق الإنسان، فهناك فقط الجمعية البحرينية لحقوق الإنسان هي الرسمية، بينما لا يوجد في البحرين مؤسسة سواها مستقلة. بقية المؤسسات الحقوقية التي نسمع منها كلها غونغو مخلوقة. لدينا المركز الذي يعمل بصفة مركز حقوق الإنسان يعمل بصفة غير رسمية لأن الحكومة قامت بحله. ألا تعتقدون بأن كل هذه الأشياء هي مجرد تغطية وتعمية للعالم عن الانتهاكات وعن استحقاقات الدولة في خلق مؤسسات صحيحة حسب المعايير الدولية؟ شكرا.
I'll answer in English. I'll answer in English, yeah.
But your Arabic is good.
No, it's fine. Okay, so for this question, I think our problem is with the law that gives the power to the government to decide who and which organization can operate. We don't have any problem. Any organization can be established supporting the government. That's not what we do, and that's not the law should be. The field should be leveled and plain for everyone, not for some people to establish an organization over a weekend or in a week, and some other organization to wait for registration for 4 years, and then they will tell them, no, you cannot work. So our position is there should be a law that gives easy access to everyone to do their job without government interference. That's why they call them non-governmental organization. And unfortunately, that's not what we see in Bahrain, and that's what we are trying to convince the government to do.
Reem Khalifa from the Associated Press. My question is about human rights defender. You did mention that Human Rights Watch would seek for a royal pardon for Nabil Rajab since the court, did not do much for his case, and Nabil's contribution is not only for Bahrain, for the human rights community around the world. So I don't know if you can clarify this more for me. And secondly, about the new list. Of travel ban for Bahraini journalists, lawyers, etc. From GCC states. Are you aware about the GCC new security agreement, which was submitted in Manama Summit 2012 last year? So I don't know, how did you mention this to the officials in Ministry of Interior, or are you planning to head for mentioning this to the Bahraini authorities or the GCC authorities as well? Thank you.
With respect to a royal pardon, I should just clarify that we are particularly urging a royal pardon for those cases of political detainees who have exhausted their judicial remedies at the Court of Cassation. As you probably know, Nabil's case has not reached that level. We hope that there is a prompt and speedy final resolution in his case. We are delighted that it was reduced to a 2-year sentence, but he shouldn't be in jail even a single day. None of these men should be. And so we are particularly urging a royal pardon for those who have exhausted their judicial remedies. I wish it didn't have to come to that. I wish we could rely on the courts to do the right thing, but that clearly hasn't happened here. With respect to the travel bans that appear to have been imposed pursuant to a GCC security agreement, obviously we don't have any facts and information about the existence of a GCC security agreement beyond what we've read in the press. We've not seen the language of such a list. We don't know who is on the list, and we welcome transparency from the GCC governments about these kinds of travel bans, because obviously if they're politically motivated, they would be inappropriate, and if they're arbitrary, they would be inappropriate. We have continued to observe how the United Arab Emirates is becoming an increasingly intolerant place for journalists and academics. Not only did they they refuse entry, of course, to yourself and to your husband, editor of a prominent Bahraini newspaper. But just this week, they also banned from entry one of the leading academics on the Gulf, Christian Coates, from the LSE. And this is a very troubling sign for a government that claims to be welcoming to international academics and international media. And, you know, I think this is an extremely disturbing development that I hope all international media and international universities look very closely at and consider in terms of assessing their continued presence in a country with increasing repression and intolerance.
Thank you for Human Rights Watch for being in Bahrain, and for you personally, Mrs. Sarah and Marwan. I would like just to make sure that whether you discussed with them practicing torture in prison and during the interrogation in everywhere, either in CID building, which is behind us here, or any police station. And what was their reply? Did they deny, or they said, we don't know?
We definitely did mention that, and last year when we were here, my colleagues were here in April, that was the finding. Actually, we reached the conclusion that beating and to sometime torture was happening outside of detention areas, and while demonstrators were arrested and taken to detention areas. What we got from the officials was denial, definitely, that was happening, and they want people to file complaint as usual, but that's not enough. We want them to make their own investigation without people going to them. If there is allegation, they should lead the investigation. But again, there was a denial. They denied that was happening in any area in recent months. You want to add anything?
Hi, I have a question.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry, my name is Ahlam. I have a question related to a quotation that has been said from the highest ranking official in Bahrain. He said that Bahrain is an oasis for human rights. So as human rights experts and assessors, do you see Bahrain as an oasis for human rights? Thank you.
No.
Hello, I'm Dr. Abdul Khalq Al-Arabi. I'm one of 20 medics who was jailed, tortured, and verdict, and finally I am dismissed. And not only of that, they also prevent the medics to work in Bahrain, even outside ministry and even inside all Bahrain. And they distribute the names of the medics on the Gulf Air also to prevent them from work. And they ban them to travel. So they are not only prevent the medic themselves, the 20 medic, they prevent all their family to live. This is a killing. They are killing the people by canister, toxic canister, and they're killing the people when they prevent from the war. Okay, this is not a human right. I think we cannot trust the people like the Minister of Justice who came on Bahrain TVs while the medics on the jail before they are going to the court and say they are the killer of a protester. And he's the one heading now the dialogue. This is the big question. Okay. The second thing, I cannot trust the Minister of Human Rights who is also sharing in defame program in Bahrain TV against the medics and the people. And also I cannot trust the triple minister. Triple minister, I mean, Amil Belushi. She was a minister of three, under her umbrella was a three ministry at that time. And she came also in conference and Bahrain TV and said, these people, the medics, and she named the people and say they are a killer before going to the court. I cannot trust all these ministers and the government. I think, are you trusting these people when you are sitting with them? And they answering your question? They are liar. They are big liar. They are sharing and killing people in Bahrain. I think we cannot trust these people. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Mariwan, for visiting Ibrahim and the rest of the political detainees in Joe. It was very nice to see them in videos and photos. My question is regarding the royal pardon. The issue of asking or talking about royal pardon makes them sick to their stomachs, starting with Abdul Wahab Hussein, coming to Ibrahim and the rest. As you explained, the judiciary system was heavily politicized. There were no practices of any justice, seeking justice, and there was a big punishment for them just to express their opinions and do their national role in a very legitimate, peaceful uprising. Again, back to my question. If they refuse the royal pardon, as those pro-government people did several times, they said several times that there is no pardon, no royal pardon. I'm just stressing that the political leaders refuse that more than these pro-government loyals do. Is there any legal method or methodology that can be introduced at the level of the United Nations? Many Bahraini activists have done quite extensive, advocacy at the United Nations level. We went to Geneva. We exposed all the realities that the Bahraini people, the peacefulness of this uprising. The rapporteur on torture, Joan Mendes, was not allowed several times to come to Bahrain, and if he was really allowed to come the first time, these political leaders would be out the second day. Well, if there was good law and good practices here. So, what can be done at the United Nations level that would, get these political detainees with their dignity that they deserve to be out as soon as possible? Just a question. Thank you for your efforts.
Unfortunately, the reality is that I don't know of an international body that has any realistic capacity to force the Bahraini government to release anyone from prison.
Sarah, Marwan, thank you so much for being here. And I think because of Human Rights Watch being in Bahrain, they have allowed one of the protesters who was run over to go into the hospital to be treated. And my question is to you, have you asked them about the militarization of the hospitals in Bahrain, and what was their response to that? Thank you.
We definitely asked about that, yes, that the government claims everyone has a right to medical access, but at the same time the government has in a few cases, in fact, issues statement that threatens people or orders hospitals and clinics they have to report if they treat demonstrators. The answer was, in every country, when someone comes with a shotgun or with cases of wounds, they have to report to the authorities, and that's why they are doing. We raised the issue that some of them, after they have left the hospital, they have been charged with illegal gatherings, and during the whole time in the hospital, they have been under surveillance and also investigated. They, one particular time, they said that's not happening, but we know that's happening, and we want that to stop. And demonstrators, they should have access to hospital, and if they are participating in peaceful demonstration, prove that's peaceful, the investigation should, the protesters, wounded protesters should not be investigation, but the one who are firing the protesters.
I have been asked to ask if any reporters or journalists have any questions before we take any more questions from non-journalists.
أمان المسقطي من جريدة الوسط. كنت بعرف بس شنو تعليقكم على تأكيدات الحكومة المستمرة في إنها نفذت تقريبا أكثر من 90% من توصيات لجنة تقصي الحقائق وأيضا توصيات جنيف وتأكيداتها بأن هي أعادت جميع المفصولين على ضوء الأحداث الأخيرة إلى وظائفهم.
About your question about the Bastouni report, no, we have issues, in fact, several statements and in-depth reporting, assessment of that or the recommendation. No, the government, unfortunately, to this day, the whole reason we are sitting here and now we are talking about the government is because of the failure of the government to implement some of the key recommendations of the Bastouni report, as well as the UPR recommendation. If the government had implemented the recommendation of the Bastouni report, we would see high-ranking officials being held accountable for what happened in February and March 2011 and what followed after that. And also, if the recommendation had been implemented, we will see the protest leaders and many others who have been convicted for participating in demonstration and peacefully expressing their views would be out by now. So no, unfortunately, some of the key recommendations of the Bastouni report have not been implemented to this day.
Any other journalists? No more journalists?
One more journalist?
No more journalists?
Shall we take two more?
Sure.
Two more. Okay. بس سؤالين اثنين من شخصين اثنين إن شاء الله نخلص.
I have two questions, in fact. One of them is you said that you met the detainees and you photographed them and taped them. Did the government give you any guarantees that they will not face any further ill treatment after you leave? And the second question is about our society, teacher society. Did you have the chance to ask Al-Belushi or anyone about that? Because our society was the only one which was dissolved during the national security law.
Well, for the first one, we definitely expect from the government will not, have any retribution against the political prisoner and anyone we met that day. That's what we expect the government, and we appreciate that they gave us the chance to meet with them, tape the part of the meeting and take pictures. So that's and we definitely closely monitor the situation. As for the Bahrain Teachers Association, well, I would like to tell you we actually did not meet with Minister Belushi. We were supposed to meet with her, but when we arrived there, she was not there because they told us she had another meeting or a workshop. So we met with two officials of the ministry, and we mentioned most of the cases the recent cases, in fact, of government interference or suppression of civil society organizations, including Bahrain Nursing Society, Bahrain Medical Society, Bahrain Teacher Society, and the Bahrain Lawyer Society. And we will continue to push hard on those cases until the government will stop its repressive campaign against non-governmental organizations in Bahrain.
Great. Thank you. All right, last question.
My name is Farid Abdullah. I'm the wife of Dr. Ali Al-Ikri. Just I want to add one point to Dr. Abdul Khaliq's speech. He didn't mention what is going on in the governmental media, what is the authority that the governmental media has. Despite most of the charges were dropped from the medics, like occupying the hospital, fabricating wounds, refusing to treat Sunni patients and the other. Despite this, still the governmental media discussing this issue till now, and the last article I read, it was in February 5 this month. And this means that they have the authority from the government to still continue discussing these issues, and especially in Arabic, to spread these lies and ignore that these charges were dropped. And I send you both an email, and I'm sure that you have the time to read it. I put the link about the press conference of the Al-Baluchi and the Ministry of Justice, that they tried the medics on TV before their first military trial. The conference was in May 2011, and the first military trial for the medics was in June 2011. And also I put a link for this article as an example for this still ongoing spreading these lies. If they say that our judiciary system is independent, they should believe it and stop spreading these news to the people. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.